All right. So we're going to get real for a minute today because midlife, it really can feel like the rules have completely changed on us. And then nobody gave us the playbook to this new way that the game is played, right? And so one day your body, it just stops responding the way it used to. And then you're waking up at 3 a.m. for no reason. Your weight, it's not budging, even though you've actually tried everything that worked in the past. And so your brain, it might be feeling foggy, your energy's gone, and then no one really seems to have answers for you. So if you've ever sat there wondering, like, is this what getting older really feels like? Or why am I doing all the right things, but nothing's working anymore? You're in the right place today because we're going to be talking about perimenopause and menopause, what they actually are, and why they show up differently for every woman, and why so many of the symptoms you've been struggling with actually aren't random at all. They're actually hormonal. I want to start with something that I kind of wish someone had told me several years ago, and that is what's happening in your body right now. It's not random. It's not something you have failed at. It's not just aging. There is a real biological shift that's happening in your body. And once you understand what's happening, so many of your symptoms and frustrations, they begin to all make sense. And then you can do something about it. So looking back, like I can actually see the signs as early as my 20s, actually, where something was off. And I had major adrenal fatigue. I had chronic exhaustion. And at the time, I was attributing it all to my autoimmune problems. But now I know that some of that could have been from my testosterone was already beginning to drop. And that was a huge piece of the puzzle. And so, most people don't realize that testosterone is the first hormone that quietly declines. It starts dropping in your late 20s or maybe early 30s. And it's not just about that sex drive that we've been led to think, but most people, it plays a big role in their energy, their muscle tone, your ability to recover from workouts, your sense of personal drive for life, and even your metabolism. So when women start saying things like, I'm so tired all of the time, or why can't I lose this weight like I used to? They're still having regular periods, most likely. And so it makes it hard to make the connection to it possibly being the beginning of perimenopause getting ready to start. But that can be early testosterone decline. And it often gets brushed off as stress or just being too busy or the season of life that we're in. But this is when we start paying attention because then something will shift again, right? And this usually is somewhere in your mid to late 30s, sometimes early 40s for those that it starts later. But that's when our progesterone begins to start to drop, right? This happens because ovulation is becoming more sporadic. And that's even if your periods are showing up. So I want to be clear about that. That doesn't mean that your periods stop or they become irregular, but progesterone is that hormone that helps us sleep deeply, feel calm, keep things like anxiety and inflammation in check, right? And this is where we start feeling like chaos and overwhelm. Overwhelm is kind of the common word that we hear from this phase of women, the phase of stage that they're in, right? Because estrogen, it's not dropping off right away, right? Because progesterone is doing that. And so what ends up happening is when they've been kind of holding a balanced space and progesterone starts dropping, estrogen kind of takes on a dominance. And so, in estrogen, it's not staying steady. What's happening is it's spiking and it's crashing and so it's moving all over the place. And so in that case, with the progesterone dropping, which is what keeps us calm and right, and the anxiety levels lower, um, we might experience mood swings. We might experience bloating. That's when the insomnia might start showing up. You might feel a little bit more irritable than you had. And so this is where, truly you may not notice this all at first. It may just be that you're waking up at 3 a.m. more than usual. One week you're waking up at 3 a.m. The next week you're sleeping great, right? But this is a season where you might feel like you're losing control. It might feel a little more scattered. And over time, when these things start to stack up, that's where that overwhelm kind of might settle in. And because we're never really taught to recognize these, as possible perimenopausal symptoms. And of course, I'm not saying that if you're feeling overwhelmed, it's all hormonal. Let me just make sure that that's clear. You got to be careful these days. Um, but we often in this season of our life, we assume that we just have to keep pushing through, right? Like this is just what's happening with stress or something else. And cortisol does play a big role in dropping our progesterone and estrogen levels. But finally, the final stage is we get closer and closer into menopause when our estrogen starts to drop and it's dropping consistently. And this is when symptoms like hot flashes, the things that we equate with menopause or perimenopause, hot flashes, vaginal dryness, night sweats, more cognitive and emotional shifts, they become more noticeable. And when both estrogen and progesterone are low, it can feel like your body isn't right. And that's just because it's asking for a whole new rhythm. Okay. And menopause, this is the definition of it. And it's kind of still vague and a little fuzzy for most people, but menopause is defined as 12 months without a period. Okay. So that a perimenopausal season, you could have consistent periods the whole time and then drop off, or you could have fluctuating and irregular ones. But by the time you've reached menopause, though, you've actually already been navigating at least a decade of hormonal shifts. Sadly, our generations before us, they didn't talk about it. And so you often moved into it without even getting to know what was happening. But what is actually happening in your body is it's trying to recalibrate. It's not failure, it's just a shift. And it's one you can actually understand, or when you actually understand, you can work with it and know what's going on and how to support it and how to help it. Okay. So let's go ahead and talk about some of these random symptoms that we are experiencing so that we can just kind of lay that groundwork, what it feels like. Because so many women were walking around dealing with symptoms that we can't explain, only to be told that it's stress, aging, or nothing at all. It's all in your head, right? But here's the things, your symptoms are not random. These are all designed by God to operate this way. And so they are connected and they all are telling you something if you're paying attention. So understanding each hormone and what's behind each one really truly can clear up a lot of confusion for us. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with testosterone because this is the one that we don't often talk about for women. It's not very well understood. Okay, but it is the one that starts fading the earliest. So, and even though they don't have a name for it, it might look like feeling physically tired or mentally flat, like you just aren't as sharp, maybe a low motivation or drive for life, even for things that you actually used to love to do, difficulty building and maintaining muscle like you used to in your youth, brain fog or like a slower processing time to just process thoughts, decreased libido for sure, and interest in intimacy, that changes. And then subtle but persistent weight gain, especially around the midsection. This is something that's often the first symptom that I hear women talk about when they start feeling the perimenopausal symptoms. But things, because of that, there might be less confidence or competitiveness without that testosterone drive, and it might take longer time for recovery from workouts or from stress even. So this is often the first hormone to drop, and yet it's the one we almost never talk about, right? So many women just assume that they're burned out or that something is wrong with them. This might be when they start going to the doctors to try to figure out, like, why are they so tired? But it could be something as simple as they're just running low on the testosterone hormone, that they didn't even know that they really needed. Because again, this is something that we associate with men, but not with women. Okay. Let's go ahead and move on to progesterone. This is the one that we have said keeps us calm, it keeps us rested, it keeps us steady, right? And so when ovulation becomes inconsistent, and like I said, this doesn't mean your periods aren't consistent. Progesterone, it's dropping and it's dropping fast. Okay. And this is when many women will feel on edge for no reason. They start waking up at 3 a.m., not being able to fall back asleep. Anybody on lack of sleep can start being on edge, right? So heightened worry, without a clear cause about what's going on. PMS symptoms that can feel more intense or last longer than they used to. Heavier periods or more irregular periods. And then this one is the one that a lot of women that don't necessarily know to associate it with perimenopause, but that's increased fluid retention and bloating. So you might see your ankles starting to swell when they didn't used to do that. Of course, the swelling and bloating around our midsection, but just increased sensitivity and inflammation on several fronts, okay? And so you might feel overstimulated and fragile emotionally. Like I said, that's where the word overwhelmed seems to be the most common word that you hear, tired and overwhelmed, right? And when you lose this calming effect of progesterone, your nervous system can kind of feel it, right? And you may not know why you feel on edge, but your body is literally missing out on that hormone to help buffer the tension and overwhelm that you might be experiencing. Okay. Okay, so now moving on to estrogen. This one is the one that's most known for being our female hormone, right? And so as it starts declining, we're moving closer to menopause. That estrogen, it starts to become more consistently low in those final years of perimenopause and into that menopause. And that's when some very classic symptoms show up. These are the ones that we know that this is like the ones that are classically known to be perimenopausal and menopausal. Um, those are the hot flashes, night sweats, the vaginal dryness or discomfort, painful intimacy, thinning skin, more visible aging, dry skin, right? Dry eyes, brittle hair, slower thinking and more forgetfulness, just moving slower in general, right? Possibly more frequent UTIs, bone density loss, more probably sore muscles, again, from just slower recovery, mood swings, feeling flat. And so this is when women often will say things like, I don't feel like myself anymore. This is when we'll look in the mirror and go, who is the woman staring back at me? Right? Like this is the stage that we're talking about. But here's the encouraging part that I want all of you to know about this. These symptoms are just information, like they're flags so that when we know them, and we start paying attention to our bodies, we can pay attention to what it's trying to say to us. And so once you connect them to these phase of hormonal changes that you're in, you can stop guessing and start responding to what your body is needing and asking for. So here's what I want you to take away from this today. Every symptom that you're experiencing, whether it's fatigue, brain fog, weight that won't budge, right? Or anxiety, like that doesn't, the anxiety piece that doesn't even make sense half the time. It's not random. Your body is just trying to talk to you. Okay. And the more you start paying attention to these signals, the more empowered you totally become to respond with clarity instead of confusion. So you don't have to figure it all out today. Isn't that good news? But knowing what to look for, that's the beginning, right? That's how you get to take your power back in this phase and stage of life. And that brings us to the next step, because if you're starting to see yourself in these symptoms, and you're just totally wondering, like, is this really what hormonal changes look like? Then it might be time to have labs done. Okay. And that's how we move from awareness to real answers. And so once you start connecting those dots between your symptoms and your hormones, the natural next question we ask ourselves is what do I do with this information? And for me, and for so many other women I've talked with, it starts with labs. When I went and had my first labs done, I did not know that when I was experiencing tiredness and frozen shoulder, which happens to be a very common symptom of perimenopause, I didn't know that. And so it's really, really wonderful when you go in and you have labs done and it just identifies for you what's been going on. Because I thought I had just had an injury to working out, right? But it lets you also know that you're not broken, you're not crazy. It just brings clarity. And so you get the full picture, right? And you can stop guessing and start making informed decisions. You have a choice, right? And how to work with your body. So when is it time to get labs? And any one of these, you don't have to have all of these, any one of these would be enough to go get labs done. So let me just make that clear, okay? Women have been, up until this generation, have been very hesitant to go get labs done when it comes to this part of their health. And so people are becoming more and more informed, and it's great. But if your symptoms have been showing up consistently for more than 2 to 3 months, it's a good time to start going and checking your labs. If you feel like you've tried everything and nothing is working, that's a good time to go get labs done. If your cycle has started to shift, or you've stopped tracking it over time because it's all over the place, that's a good time to go. And if you feel like you're a complete different version of yourself and you can't explain why, that's a good time to go. And this is the moment where a lot of women, they'll hesitate because they're not sure where to go sometimes, right? Or what to even ask for. And the truth is, most primary care doctors just aren't trained in this kind of hormone care. It's been a little bit more mysterious and unfamiliar to a lot of them as well. And so they'll often run basic labs and everything will come back normal. And even then, they'll kind of say, okay, everything's normal, but you know things are not normal. Right. And that's not why you went and spent all that money to go see them. So that's why I'm highly recommending finding a provider who specializes in hormone health, someone who can really see the full picture and take the symptoms seriously. Um, and you're hearing this from someone who's not trying to sell you anything. So I hope that that helps relieve things too. But there's been a lot of confusion around bioidentical hormone therapy. And so some of it is based on old studies, some of it is from fear, but the conversation is totally changing. And so I'm not here to tell you what to take. That's between you and your providers. I'm not an expert in the hormone world, but I do want to share this. Like, getting support earlier rather than later can make a massive difference in how you feel physically, emotionally, and mentally through this stage. And many women who have fought the right balance of bioidentical hormones say it feels like coming home to themselves again. Right. And I mean, why would we not want to at least have a conversation with our doctors about that if that's the case? So if you want to learn more about this, I highly recommend following Dr. Marie Claire on Instagram. She's one of the best voices on this topic. And she has an amazing book that totally breaks it all down in complete plain language for you to understand. She lists way more symptoms that can be expected and understood through those hormonal shifts. But what should you ask for when you go to have labs done? Well, here's a basic list of things that you can ask for. You can ask for your estradiol to be checked, your progesterone, your testosterone levels, your DHE levels, your cortisol, especially your morning cortisol levels, your thyroid panel, which is going to cover the TSH, the free T3 and the free T4 numbers, your fasting insulin, which is the HbA1c, that covers the blood sugar response on your body. And of course, you don't have to interpret all these numbers on your own. Like, you'll have the labs done, and then they'll be able to give you a baseline and an understanding for moving forward. And of course, talk to your doctor if you don't understand any of those terms. But I do have that checklist in the workbook for the week. So, go into the Facebook group, join the group, get that. This isn't about finding this magic fix, though, because I want to remind you there's nothing broken about your body. In fact, the Lord designed you perfectly and wonderfully, and this season is on purpose. Okay. And I may get into that later in other episodes involving hormones, but not today. But this is about taking the mystery completely out of what you're feeling and giving yourself like a starting point that actually will make sense, that can help you celebrate and appreciate this season of your life. Because when you have the information, you can start making choices that actually work for your life, your body, your future. We all experience this completely different. So let's go ahead and take a breath for a second, right? You've taken in a lot of information today, maybe even more than you've ever heard about hormones in one sitting. And maybe not, because we are talking about this more often these days. But here's what I hope you're walking away with today, okay? What you're experiencing in your body isn't random. You're not crazy. You're not just tired, emotional, or weak. You're in a phase of life that your body has never been in before. And it's asking you to pay attention, right? As simply as that. And now you have a language for what's happening. And you've got insight on how testosterone, progesterone, and estrogen can play their part. You know that getting labs done isn't about searching for what's wrong. It's about finding the information you've just been missing. Okay. And so I've created a workbook that has hormone lab checklist and symptom tracker in it as well to help you start just connecting those personal dots for you, so that you can walk into your doctor's office or just in your journal with clarity and confidence, right? And so it's available right now in the Facebook group. So if you haven't joined us there yet, go over there, download it, use it, let that be your starting point, and then start talking about it in the group. We're all there to help and support each other. And so next week, we're going to continue this conversation and we're going to talk about what to do with those labs once you get the results, right? Like we'll look at certain levels, what they might mean and be pointing to, how to start building a plan that actually makes sense for your life. And then this is where it gets even more exciting, right? Because we're not just naming what's happening, we're going to start learning how to support yourself through what's happening. So invite a friend, and I'm excited that you came today, and we'll see you next week.